Hey guys, we are going to be graphing an equation with a square root in it, okay? Now, if you've been graphing parabolas or absolute value graphs, this is going to feel very familiar, but if you haven't been doing that, it's totally okay, all right? So when we are doing these types of graphs, we have what we like to call a parent graph, okay? So if I were just being asked to graph y equals the square root of x, even if I just plugged in points for x, got y, this is what my graph would look like, okay? But you're like, I'm not being asked to graph that. I'm being asked to graph something that maybe looks like something like this, right? So what I know is that these two graphs are related, okay? And I can look at it and figure out how to change this graph a little bit to get this graph, okay? And to do that, here is my key, okay? So in this problem, I don't have a number out front here. Well, technically there is an invisible one, right? But I don't have a number besides 1 out there, okay? If I did have a number out there, I will link a problem like this, but I just want to show you really fast how that can affect my graph, okay? So you see the blue one, that's the parent graph I just showed you earlier, okay? The green one, you see it has a 4 out front, and you see how it's like stretched out, okay? The red one has a fraction out front, and you see how it's compressed, okay? So that's how having a number or a fraction out front can affect your graph, okay? Also, if you have a negative there, again, I'll link a video where I have a negative out front, it's going to flip your graph over the x-axis, okay? So basically how this one, hold on, it's coming, how this one goes up like that, if it has a negative out front, it's gonna go down instead, okay? All right. Then we have the h and k, all right? So the one under the square root, h, tells me how much my graph is going to shift to the left or the right, okay? And you actually do opposite of the sign. So here we have +3, which in my head makes me think to the right 3, right, positive, but we're actually gonna do opposite of the sign. So we are going to shift to the left 3, and I just like to make myself a little note there, okay? The one on the back is how much we shift up and down, and we stick with the sign on this one. So -5 means I'm going to shift it down 5, okay? All right. Now, my parent graph started at 0, 0, right? So I'm going to start at 0, 0, and I'm going to go to the left 3 and down 5, okay? So this is the new place that my graph starts, okay? Now, there are some teachers that just want to know that you know where the new graph starts, and you just draw a line that looks similar to the parent graph, right? That goes up and over, okay? Some teachers, that's all they want at this point. If that is the case, hey, like this video and you can stop watching, okay? But some teachers may want you to plug in some more points to have a more accurate view of what is happening with this graph, okay? So we're gonna do that. So we are going to make a table, X and Y, okay, to kind of see exactly what this graph is going to look like, okay? So one thing when we're doing square roots, you can pick any number to plug in, right? But we kind of want to pick numbers that'll make it easier for us, right? I don't really want to do the square root of 3 if I don't have to, because the square root of 3 is not a pretty number. It's an ugly decimal, okay? So I kind of like to remind myself of the easier square roots. So the square root of 0 is 0, right? The square root of 1 is 1. If you need a square root review, I'll link one in the corner. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3, right? The other numbers have square roots, they're just not nice numbers like this, right? So it's good, you don't have to, but if you can, it's nice to be able to pick a number you plug in that's gonna give you one of these numbers to have a nice number, okay? If you're like, what is this lady talking about? I'll just do decimals, go for it, okay? But I'm going to plug in, okay, well, first of all, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. If I were to plug in -3, I would get -5, right? Because that is already a point I know on my graph. If you want to double check, go ahead and plug it in, okay? So I know that one. I am also going to plug in -2 and 1 and see what happens with this graph, okay? So when I plug in -2, I'm going to grab a different color. I'm going to have y equals the square root of -2 plus 3 And then we have the minus 5 on the back. Okay. Y equals -2 plus 3 gives me 1, right? So see how plugging in -2 got me square root of 1? All right, so then I have the square root of 1 is 1 minus 5. And 1 minus 5 gives me a -4. Okay, so when I plugged in -2, I got -4. Now, let's go ahead and graph that on here. So I'm going to do -2, -4. There's another point. And let's do one more. Let's do 1. Okay, so when I plug in 1, I'm going to get y equals the square root of, I'm plugging in 1 plus 3 minus 5. Okay, 1 plus 3 gives me 4 minus 5. Square root of 4 is 2 minus 5. And 2 minus 5 gives me -3. Okay. So when I plugged in 1, I got -3. So 1 down 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now that's giving me a pretty good idea of what this guy looks like. Guys, my cute kids are playing upstairs if you hear noises. Okay, so that is what my graph looks like. So see how it is very similar to this graph. It's just moved over and down. Okay, and as you do these more and more, you may get to the point where you know the graph well enough that you don't really even need to plug in points. Okay, all right, but plug them in whenever you need to. Okay, all right, if you need some more square root graphing videos, I will link a playlist for you. Thanks.